Connor Tomlinson. He's a host of the Lotus Eaters podcast. Good morning to you, Connor.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Wind me up today.
Well, I mean, I don't even know where to start, but there's lots to race through, so let's get through it. First of all, the National Trust been accused of using anti-white rhetoric by Clemmie Badenoch. She, of course, is the not just the business secretary, but she's also, of course, Women's and Equalities Minister. And the National Trust has adopted guidelines that use anti-white rhetoric, she says, after they started using the phrase, along with lots of other organisations, of global majority as opposed to ethnic minority. But the whole point of ethnic minority is that you're an ethnic minority in this country, because, you know, if you're black or Asian in this country, you are an ethnic minority. If you're in India, you're not an ethnic minority if you're Asian, and if you're in Nigeria, you're not an ethnic minority if you're black. That's kind of why we use this phrase. But global majority just basically means non-white. So lumping everyone in together strikes me as, I think she's quite right. It's not just anti-white, it's a bit racist, isn't it?
Well, quite. It's very context-dependent. As demographer Paul Morland pointed out when this was being covered, global majority heritage and then national minority, if you move to China and say that, it means literally nothing. So for our institutions to parrot this, it doesn't situate us in a particular time and context, which is English history. And I think that's the entire point. It's meant to gaslight the English public through their national monuments, through their history and culture, into thinking that actually we're all the same, that you don't have a particular and distinct history unless we can use it to guilt trip you into thinking that the slave trade, for example, is uniquely bad in England, and therefore you can't oppose mass migration, which is obviously the thing that's being imposed on the British public at the moment. And it is also very mask off because we hear constantly about protecting minority rights from everyone from the civil service to our political leaders. Well, now, suddenly, when it can be used against white people, and they collectivise as white, I just think of myself as English, but there you go. Then they say it's a minority. Oh, suddenly, we don't have protected status in law, and suddenly it's not about protecting minorities, it's just about having power.
Well, exactly, again, and it's all about the oppressed and the oppressor, and isn't it, as well? But it's just all these different organisations, you know, Arts Council, England, NHS South East, hosted a global majority conference. There are global majority directed studentships, whatever the hell a studentship is, sponsored by the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. This is bizarre, but this all comes about from the National Trust, this whole idea that sort of the countryside is too white. And people visiting stately homes are too white, and we need to make sure that it's that the countryside and stately homes are places that global majority people feel comfortable visiting. Sorry, are there signs saying keep out your black, no Asians here? No, of course they're not. I mean, basically, isn't it just middle-class people who do a lot of this stuff, and they're largely white in this country at the current time for various obvious demographic reasons? I don't understand where the self-hatred comes from. That's the bit I find strange.
There's a real mix here. Of course, there's the middle manager, diversity hire, people that are sort of in their mid-50s and just want to be accepted at cocktail parties and the like.
They're the mediocre people who just want to be thought of as, you know, they're wearing the right lanyard, so they're a good person. Yeah,
quite. But then there's also a really insidious and uncomfortable inflection to this. I mean, remember when Humza Yousaf, former First Minister of Scotland, who was installed rather than elected and then quickly ushered out because he screwed up the job, was standing up and saying how evil it was that the native Scottish population were the predominant staffers in pretty much all Scottish
judges, white. Government ministers, white.
Yeah, when he said that with such venom, he wasn't making a really nuanced point about racial equality. He was just mask-off moment, he has contempt for white people. And so this kind of equality legislation, this insistence, we just need to be more diverse and inclusive, which is always code for less white, it's basically a Trojan horse for people who are not white to guilt-trip white people into legitimising their hatred.
Again, all these people, they're all just obsessed with colour. People who are obsessed with skin colour, you know what we call those people? Racists. It's a really simple term. Let's also talk about, related to this, according to the Dean of Trinity College, Cambridge, Dr. Michael Banner, the UK owes Caribbean nations a total of £205 billion in slavery reparations because we were once the leading slaving nation in the world, and present-day descendants of slaves deserve compensation. And this is a new book by him. Oh, what a surprise. Titled Britain's Slavery Debt. I mean, these bases on the compensation claims made by slave owners when the trade was first abolished in 1833. Gosh, who was it who abolished it? Oh, yeah, us. It is bizarre, isn't it, that they never ever mention slavery by the Roman Empire or, you know, by the Mongols or by pretty much every single empire in the world, or anyone saying maybe all those African leaders who sold African slaves to white Europeans. Maybe they should pay some compensation. It's uniquely the white West, isn't it, that's at fault?
Well, quite. The Barbary pirates abducted about 1.25 million Brits to be sold into the Arab slave trade. Or we have documents from when the British Empire went to abolish slavery in Africa, when they went to Kingdom of Benin in now modern Nigeria. King Gezo said, "You cannot take the slave trade from me. It's the lifeblood of my people. Mothers sing their children to sleep at night with the song of an enemy vanquished to slavery." There were people crucified on the road to the kingdom. And we spent between 1807 and 1867, I think it's about 2% of our GDP, the equivalent to the foreign aid budget adjusted for inflation, every year on abolishing the slave trade. So it became the most expensive foreign aid effort in all of history. To say that we're uniquely guilty for this is not only absurd. Actually, we're uniquely heroic for expunging.
Absolutely. I just think these people are utterly absurd, aren't they? But let's also just find, I want to get to this last story. I'm very encouraged by this. Something that key research backed by Kemi Baden, not the business secretary, found that the politicisation of business is not going down well, either with staff or with customers. 4 in 10 people said they'd be less likely to keep working for a company if they were asked to wear badges showing their pronouns. Half of people think businesses have become too concerned about taking political positions on contested issues and being activists rather than just, serving customers. I mean, amen to that. We are in a good sizable, if not majority, but large minority of people who are fed up with this stuff.
You've been raising the salience of this for ages, Julia, with your unwavering insistence that, of course, trans women are, in fact, men because you have eyes and recognise reality. My only issue with this is I'm glad that Kemi Badenoch's coming out and making noise about this, probably because she thinks she's going to be Tory leader. Let's be honest.
No, she's been solid on this for years, all to her credit.
Sure, but the megaphone has been amplified in anticipation of an electoral wipeout. But until the Tories get serious and actually scrap the Equality Act, which allows public sector bodies and businesses to be sued for violations of equality, they will keep falling afoul of this and have this constant contradiction between the Rainbow Brigade and people who see sense.
Absolutely. Connor, so good to talk to you. We raced through. I mean, we could do a whole 3 hours on all these mad stories. Connor Tomlinson, host of the Lotus Eaters podcast, thank you so much for that. Sam Armstrong still with us. It is insane, isn't it? And all of these things, the worst thing about all of it is it's going to get so much worse under Labour if they do get in the next election. And the Tories are not getting through enough legislation. They could stop a lot of this stuff, at least force Labour to bring it back. They're just going to allow this stuff to carry on.
Yeah, if it feels like there's an inevitable progression, you ain't seen nothing yet. The pace is going to speed up. I'm particularly terrified that Labour have in the past backed proposals for a Scotland-type hate crime law, which would see you and me up before the beaks pretty darn quickly.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? If necessary, I'll go to prison on this one. Freedom of speech is always worth fighting for. There'll be a lot of good fun people in there. It'd be great for the company. Thank you so much.